The massive holographic projection shimmered to life across every inhabited world in the galaxy. From the crystal cities of Arcturus to the floating colonies of the Vega system, billions of beings stopped their daily routines to witness what their leaders promised would be a historic moment. Admiral Korthak's reptilian face filled the sky above countless planets. His scaled skin bore the deep green hue that marked him as one of the highest-ranking members of the Zerion Empire. Battle scars crisscrossed his jaw, each one a testament to 2 decades of warfare against the human species. His yellow eyes, cold and calculating, swept across the camera as if he could see every viewer personally. Citizens of the galaxy, his voice rumbled through translation devices in 1,000 different languages. Today marks the end of the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced. On the mining world of Kepler 442, the insectoid workers paused their excavation to listen. In the orbital stations around distant suns, the jellyfish-like Aquarians floated motionless in their water-filled chambers. Even the machine consciousness of the Silicon Collective diverted processing power to analyze this moment. The Terran. Defense coalition has fallen, Korthak continued, his forked tongue flicking out briefly. Their primitive species, with their chaotic emotions and unpredictable warfare, has finally been crushed beneath the organized might of our empire. Behind him, holographic displays showed burning human ships drifting in space. Footage of human colonies under bombardment played on loop. The carefully edited presentation painted a picture of complete and total victory. No longer will their reckless expansion threaten the established order. No longer will their barbaric tactics disrupt our peaceful galaxy. The human plague has been eliminated. Light years away, aboard the damaged human vessel, New Solhe, Captain Lee Dong-ho stood on a bridge that told a very different story. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles. The air recyclers wheezed with mechanical strain. Through the cracked viewport's Earth hung in the distance like a dying ember, its surface scarred by orbital bombardment. Dong-ho was a man who had aged far beyond his 43 years. His black hair, once neatly trimmed in military fashion, now hung unkempt around a face lined with exhaustion and loss. His uniform, standard navy blue of the Terran Defense Coalition, bore burns and tears from recent battles. Beside him, Commander Park Min-ah struggled to maintain her composure. Her fingers dug into the tactical console with such force that the metal groaned under the pressure. At 38, she had commanded 3 different vessels during the war, watching each one, destroyed in humanity's desperate retreat. Her dark eyes reflected the flames of their burning homeworld. "Sir, incoming transmission from the refugee convoy," announced Lieutenant Kim Jae-sung from the communications station. The young officer, barely 25, had volunteered for this final mission knowing he might never see another sunrise. His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "The evacuation ships are barely ahead of their pursuit fleet. Admiral Korthak's forces are gaining." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady beeping of life support systems and the distant rumble of damaged engines. Through the comm system, they could hear the panicked voices of civilian ships loaded with human survivors, families separated by the chaos of war, children crying for parents who would never return, scientists carrying the accumulated knowledge of their species in encrypted data cores. "How many made it out?" Dong-ho asked quietly. "Approximately 2 million souls across 47 vessels," reported Chief Petty Officer Han Soo-jin from her station. "Less than 1% of Earth's population." The numbers hit the bridge crew like physical blows. Billions of lives lost. Centuries of human achievement reduced to ash. Their species teetering on the edge of extinction. "Sir," Kim Jae-sung's voice broke through their grief. "Admiral Korthak is broadcasting again. He's offering terms for the surrender of the remaining fleet." On the main screen, Korthak's image appeared once more. This time his message was directed specifically at the human survivors. "Remnants of the human fleet, your resistance is meaningless. Surrender now, and we will grant you quick deaths. Continue to flee, and we will make your final moments a testament to the futility of opposing our empire." Minna's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm. "Give me 5 minutes alone with that scaled bastard," she growled. But Dong-ho raised his hand for silence. His eyes had taken on a different quality, no longer the haunted look of a defeated commander, but something colder and more determined. "Signal all remaining vessels," he ordered. "Execute Protocol 7. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Minar's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The decoy retreat," she whispered. Dong Ho turned to face his crew, and for the first time, in months, he smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. 20 years of war has taught us many things, Commander. We've learned that sometimes the greatest victory comes from apparent defeat. His voice carried a weight that made every person on the bridge straighten with renewed purpose. Outside, the stars seemed to shimmer with new possibilities. It's time they learned what happens when you corner a desperate species. 3 months had passed since Admiral Korthak's victory broadcast echoed across the galaxy. The Xerian Empire's celebration had lasted for weeks, with parades on their homeworld and monuments erected to commemorate the extinction of humanity. Across occupied human territories, the systematic erasure of human civilization had begun with ruthless efficiency. On the former human colony of New Busan, towering alien war machines rolled through empty streets, their mechanical arms tearing down libraries and museums. Ancient Korean temples that had survived Earth's destruction were reduced to rubble. Art galleries that once displayed humanity's greatest works now lay in smoking ruins. The Xerian soldiers, their scaled faces showing no emotion, methodically destroyed every trace of human achievement. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. On New Jeju, the floating cities that had been humanity's pride were systematically dismantled. The orbital stations around Proxima Centauri, once bustling with human activity, were converted into prison camps for the few surviving humans who hadn't escaped with the evacuation fleets. Commander Vextar, one of Korthak's most trusted lieutenants, stood atop the ruins of Seoul University on New Busan. His forearms gestured dismissively at the destruction below. "Pathetic creatures," he hissed to his subordinates. "They called themselves intelligent, yet they built with such fragile materials. Their entire culture crumbles at the slightest touch." The galaxy's other species watched this systematic destruction with a mixture of relief and unease. The crystalline beings of the Andorian cluster had always feared human unpredictability. The machine intelligences of Sector 7 found human chaos incompatible with their ordered existence. Even the peaceful traders of the Outer Rim felt safer, knowing the aggressive human species could no longer threaten their carefully maintained neutrality. But far beyond the edge of charted space, in a region the galactic map simply labeled as the Void, a very different story was unfolding. The asteroid designated VX7 looked like countless others in the empty darkness between galaxies. Its surface was scarred and lifeless, showing no signs of the massive installation hidden within its core. Deep beneath kilometers of rock and ice, Admiral Choi Seung-woo stood in a command center that defied everything the galaxy thought they knew about human capabilities. Seung-woo was a man transformed by necessity. Once a respected naval commander who had followed regulations and proper procedures, 3 months in the Void had changed him into something harder, more focused. His graying hair was tied back in a simple knot, and his eyes held the intensity of someone who had stared into the abyss and decided to fight back. The holographic display before him showed not defeat, but the most ambitious military project in human history. Hundreds of installation markers glowed across the three-dimensional star map, each one representing a hidden human facility. Asteroid bases hollowed out by desperate engineers, rogue planets captured and converted into massive shipyards, space stations constructed from the wreckage of their retreat, rebuilt into something far more dangerous. Around the command center, brilliant minds worked on projects that would have seemed like fantasy to their former allies. Dr. Yang Hye-jin, once Earth's leading theoretical physicist, had aged visibly during their time in exile, but her mind had never been sharper. Her laboratory teams worked around the clock, pushing the boundaries of science itself. "Admiral," Hye-jin reported, her voice carrying exhaustion but also excitement. "The quantum fold drives are ready for testing. The breakthrough came when we stopped trying to work within conventional physics and started exploring what happens when you break the rules entirely." She gestured to a display showing impossible mathematical equations. "Our ships can now exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. To enemy sensors, we'll appear to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Captain Ryu Taehyun limped over to examine the data. His left leg had been badly injured during the retreat from Earth, but he had refused medical discharge. The scarred veteran studied the readings with the eye of someone who had seen too much conventional warfare. "This is beyond anything the galaxy has ever developed," he muttered. "How are we even powering these systems?" "Desperation is a powerful motivator," replied Chief Engineer Bayek Jinnah from her workstation. "We've learned to extract energy from sources the other species consider impossible to harness. Dark matter reactors, quantum vacuum fluctuations, even controlled micro-black holes." Taehyun's scarred face showed amazement. "And the temporal displacement cannons." Heejin's tired face lit up with scientific pride. "Fully functional. When we fire these weapons, we're not just attacking in the present moment. We're attacking across multiple timeline possibilities. The enemy won't just face our attack, they'll face every possible variation of our attack simultaneously." The implications were staggering. Traditional shields and armor were designed to stop attacks from a single direction at a single moment in time. How do you defend against a weapon that hits you from multiple timelines at once? Young Lieutenant Song, Minho, barely out of the academy when the war began, looked up from his engineering console. "Sir, the construction bays report that the first squadron of fold-capable fighters is ready for combat trials. The pilots are requesting permission to begin training exercises." Around the command center, other officers provided similar updates. The weapons laboratories had developed ammunition that could phase through enemy shields. The shipyards had produced vessels that could travel faster than anything in the known galaxy. The communication teams had created networks that operated outside of normal space-time, making them impossible to intercept or jam. Shang Wu listened to each report with growing satisfaction. 3 months ago, they had been refugees fleeing certain death. Now they commanded capabilities that would reshape galactic warfare itself. 20 years of apparent defeat has taught us much about survival," he said to his assembled commanders. His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had found hope in the darkest possible circumstances. "The galaxy thought human unpredictability was our weakness. They were wrong. It was always our greatest strength." He turned to face the holographic display showing their hidden empire. "Now let's teach them about human ingenuity." The first anomaly appeared on a routine sensor sweep of the Sol system. Petty Officer Zekthan, a young Xerian technician manning the deep space monitoring station, almost dismissed it as equipment malfunction. The readings showed impossible energy signatures emanating from Earth's dead surface, patterns that defied every known law of physics. "Sergeant Mordak," Zekthan called nervously to his superior, "I'm detecting quantum fluctuations around the third planet. The patterns are unusual." Sergeant Mordak's scaled head turned toward the display, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "Define unusual, rookie." "Sir, it's like space itself is folding and unfolding around Earth. The energy readings suggest massive industrial activity, but our orbital scans show nothing but ruins." Mordak's clawed hand struck the console. "Run a full diagnostic. These readings are impossible. That world is dead, we made sure of it." But the readings persisted. Across the galaxy, similar reports began filtering through Xerian command networks. Strange sensor ghosts appearing and disappearing near former human territories. Unexplained gravitational waves rippling through space. Energy signatures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Admiral Korthak received these reports aboard his flagship Dominion's Edge, a massive dreadnought that served as the mobile command center for the occupation forces. The vessel stretched for kilometers, its hull bristling with weapons capable of cracking planets. In its central command chamber, holographic displays showed the Empire's complete control over former human space. "Impossible readings, my lord," reported Commander Vextar, his forearms gesturing dismissively. "Probably equipment failures caused by residual radiation from our bombardments. The human worlds are still settling after our cleansing operations." Korthak's yellow eyes studied the data with growing unease. 20 years of warfare had taught him never to underestimate human resourcefulness. "Double the sensor sweeps." Deploy. Additional monitoring stations. If humans survived our final assault, I want them found and eliminated. But the humans were already much closer than Korthak imagined. Directly above his flagship, invisible and undetectable, Commander John So-Young's stealth cruiser Ghost of Busan held position in folded space. The vessel existed in a quantum state that made it simultaneously present and absent from normal reality. To enemy sensors, it simply wasn't there. So-Young had once been a test pilot for humanity's experimental aircraft program. Now she commanded technology that would have seemed like magic to her former self. Her ship could phase between dimensions, exist in multiple locations at once, and strike from angles that enemy shields couldn't protect against. "Target acquired," she whispered to her crew. The bridge was bathed in dim red light to preserve their stealth systems. Around her, 23 carefully selected officers worked with practiced silence. Each had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return. Tactical Officer Oh Chang-min studied his displays with intense concentration. The young man had lost his entire family during Earth's bombardment, and his desire for justice burned cold and focused. Phase cannons locked onto their command section, quantum torpedoes ready for deployment. "Time to show them what human ingenuity looks like," So-Young muttered. "Initiate phase bombardment." The Ghost of Busan opened fire with weapons that existed outside normal space-time. The phase cannons fired energy beams that traveled through folded dimensions, bypassing the alien flagship's massive shields entirely. The quantum torpedoes materialized inside the enemy vessel's hull, exploding in multiple timeline possibilities simultaneously. Aboard the Dominion's edge, chaos erupted. Instantly, explosions tore through sections that should have been completely protected. Fires burned in compartments that enemy sensors insisted were undamaged. The ship's massive shields sparked and failed as they tried to defend against attacks that came from impossible directions. "We're under attack," Vexitar screamed, his calm composure shattered. "But our sensors show no enemy vessels." "Impossible!" Korthak roared, his scaled fists pounding his command throne. "Our shields are impenetrable. Our sensors are the finest in the galaxy." The answer came as more explosions rocked his flagship. "Sir," gasped a terrified communications officer, "we're receiving reports from across the fleet. Ships are exploding." From the inside out. "Our vessels are being destroyed by weapons that don't exist." Across the galaxy, similar scenes of impossible warfare played out simultaneously. Captain Nam Yun-ho's strike force materialized around Proxima Station, the heavily fortified supply depot that fed the entire occupation force. His squadron of fold-capable fighters phased in and out of normal space, striking vital targets before disappearing like ghosts. The station's commander, a veteran Zerian warrior named General Krekthos, watched in horror as his defenses proved useless. "How are they inside our shield perimeter?" he demanded. "Our sensors show empty space." His question was answered by explosions that tore through the station's reactor core. Nam Yun-ho's fighters had fired their weapons from folded space, materializing the explosions directly inside critical systems. The massive station began breaking apart, its artificial gravity failing as power systems cascaded into failure. Meanwhile, Commander Ahn Yun-ji led the most audacious attack of all. Her task force struck at the Empire's central communication hub in the Vega system, a facility the size of a small moon that coordinated military operations across hundreds of worlds. Her ships used the aliens' own communication networks against them, injecting viruses that turned their coordination systems into chaos. "This is impossible," came panicked transmissions across alien frequencies. "They're everywhere at once. How are they attacking in 12 sectors simultaneously?" The answer was simpler than the terrified aliens could comprehend. Humanity had learned to think in dimensions their enemies couldn't imagine. While the galaxy's other species built bigger ships and stronger shields, humans had learned to sidestep the very foundations of conventional warfare. In the command bunkers of the Zerian Empire, military analysts stared at displays that showed attacks happening everywhere at once. Their carefully organized empire, built on the assumption of technological superiority, was crumbling before enemies that shouldn't exist. "Admiral Korthak," gasped a communications officer aboard the burning flagship. We're receiving hundreds of distress calls. The humans are attacking our supply lines, our communication networks, our forward bases. It's like they're in 12 places at once. Korthak's reptilian face twisted with rage and disbelief. That's impossible. We destroyed their species. We watched their worlds burn. But deep in space, Admiral Choi Sung-woo received reports of successful strikes across the galaxy. His gamble had paid off magnificently. The aliens had celebrated their victory too early, not realizing that humanity's greatest strength had never been their weapons or ships. It had always been their ability to think differently, to find solutions where others saw only problems, and to never, ever give up. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you backed humanity into a corner. The Zerion Empire's 1,000-year reign began to collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. What had seemed impossible just weeks earlier was now happening across hundreds of star systems. The species that had ruled through fear and overwhelming force suddenly found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't understand, predict, or defeat. On the mining world of Kepler 442, the insectoid workers had labored under Zerion oppression for generations. Their queen, Hive Mother Zakti, had watched her people suffer in silence, believing resistance was futile. But when human phase ships materialized in their system and began dismantling Zerion installations with impossible ease, everything changed. "The scaled ones flee like cowards," clicked one of her warrior drones, its mandibles chattering with excitement. "The humans fight with weapons that exist beyond understanding." Zakti's compound eyes watched human fighters dance through space, phasing in and out of reality as they struck Zerion supply convoys. "If these mammals can return from extinction to challenge the Empire, perhaps we too can reclaim our freedom." The insectoid rebellion began with a single mining facility. Within days it had spread across the entire world. Zerion overseers who had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by workers who fought with desperate determination inspired by humanity's example. Similar uprisings erupted throughout the galaxy. The crystalline beings of the Andorian cluster, who had submitted to Zerion rule centuries ago, began shattering their oppressors' control systems with focused sonic attacks. The aquatic Merkathi flooded Zerion installations on their ocean worlds, while the machine consciousness of Sector 7 simply deleted Zerion command codes from their systems. General Huang Minseo coordinated the liberation of the Centauri colonies from the bridge of her command ship, Unified Spirit. The veteran officer had fought in the early years of the Human-Zerion War, back when both sides used conventional weapons and tactics. Now she commanded a force that defied every military manual ever written. "General," reported her aide, Captain Yo Sung-ho, "the Centauri resistance is requesting immediate support. The Zerion garrison is using human prisoners as shields." Minseo studied the tactical display with calm precision. Around her, the bridge crew included not just humans, but also recently freed members of other species. A crystalline being from Tandoria worked alongside a machine intelligence from Sector 7. An insectoid communications officer translated battle reports from the Kepler system. "Tell Captain Park's squadron to use the dimensional phase approach," Minseo ordered. "We'll materialize our rescue teams directly inside the prison complex, while our fighters engage the garrison from folded space." The operation unfolded with clockwork precision. Human rescue teams phased through solid walls to reach the prisoners, while fighters struck Zerion forces from angles that made conventional defense impossible. Within hours, 3,000 human civilians and twice as many alien prisoners were free. "Remember," Minseo told her mixed-species force as they prepared, "for the next operation, we're not here for revenge. We're here to ensure this never happens again." Her words spread through rebel communication networks across the galaxy. This wasn't about one species dominating another. This was about ending domination itself. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Shin, Wu Jin's Special Operations Team, had achieved something that would have been impossible during the conventional war. Deep in the fortress world of Zerion Prime, they had captured 3 of the Empire's most senior commanders, including Admiral Korthak himself. The interrogation facility was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Constructed from folded space, technology, it existed partially outside normal reality. Escape was literally impossible because the prisoners couldn't interact with the universe beyond their cells. Korthak sat in his quantum-locked cell, his reptilian features showing confusion and fear for the first time in his military career. The scaled admiral who had once commanded fleets capable of destroying star systems now found himself powerless against enemies he couldn't comprehend. Wu Jin entered the cell with quiet confidence. The human officer bore scars from the early Seoul years of the war when victory had seemed impossible and defeat had felt inevitable. Now those same scars marked him as a survivor of humanity's darkest hour and a witness to their greatest triumph. "Your species was declared extinct," Korthak growled, his yellow eyes burning with frustrated rage. "I watched your worlds burn. I saw your fleets destroyed. How do you possess technology that surpasses our entire civilization?" The question hung in the air between them. Around the galaxy, millions of beings wondered the same thing. How had humanity, supposedly the most primitive species in known space, developed capabilities that made the mighty Xerion Empire look like children playing with sticks? Wu Jin's response was delivered with quiet certainty. "Desperation breeds innovation. You gave us 20 years to think our way out of extinction." The colonel activated a holographic display showing the scope of human technological development. "While you celebrated your victories, we learned to see beyond the limitations that constrain other species. While you built bigger ships and stronger weapons, we learned to rewrite the rules of physics itself." Korthak stared at the display in disbelief. "Impossible. Our scientists are the finest in the galaxy. Our technology represents thousands of years of advancement." "Your scientists worked within established parameters," Wu Jin replied. "They improved existing designs and followed proven theories. But when you're facing extinction, you don't have the luxury of following the rules. You either innovate beyond what anyone thinks possible or you die." Through the facility's quantum-locked walls, the sounds of celebration could be heard. Species across the galaxy were declaring their independence from Xerion rule. Trade routes that had been closed for centuries were reopening. Worlds that had been stripped of resources were beginning to rebuild. Commander Vextar, captured alongside his admiral, spoke from his adjacent cell. "You cannot govern a galaxy with chaos. Order requires strength. Dominance ensures stability." "That's where you're wrong," Wu Jin said, turning to face the four-armed alien. "We're not here to govern anyone. We're here to make sure no one governs through fear again." The human officer gestured toward the celebration sounds outside. "What you're hearing isn't chaos, it's freedom. Every species in this galaxy has the right to determine their own destiny. That's not a human concept, it's a universal truth that your empire tried to suppress." As Wu Jin left the interrogation facility, reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. The Xerion Empire, which had seemed invincible just months earlier, was dissolving as rapidly as it had once expanded. Species after species was declaring independence, inspired by humanity's impossible comeback, and guided by their example of fighting for freedom rather than dominance. The galaxy was transforming into something unprecedented, a community of equals, rather than a hierarchy of oppressors and victims. And at the center of this transformation were the humans who had refused to accept extinction, choosing instead to evolve beyond every limitation their enemies had assumed was absolute. The great hall that had once echoed with Xerion victory celebrations now hosted something the galaxy had never witnessed before. Where Admiral Korthak had once declared the extinction of humanity, representatives from over 100 worlds now gathered for the first Galactic Freedom Assembly. The massive chamber, built from crystalline materials that reflected light in impossible patterns, buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages. Hive Mother Zakti's insectoid delegates clicked excitedly as they shared mining technologies with the crystalline beings from Andoria. The aquatic Merkathi had brought floating tanks that allowed them to participate alongside air-breathing species. Even the machine consciousness of Sector 7 had sent mobile platforms to represent their digital civilization. At the center of this unprecedented gathering stood President Lim Soo-jin, elected by the scattered human survivors to speak for their species. She was a small woman by human standards, barely reaching the shoulders of most alien delegates, but her presence commanded absolute attention. Her simple black suit contrasted sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other representatives. Fellow beings of the galaxy, she began, her voice carried by translation devices to every corner of the vast chamber. 6 months ago, most of you believed humanity was extinct. Today we stand together not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals, choosing our shared future. The hall fell silent. Even the constant humming of the machine intelligences ceased as her words sank in. We didn't fight to become your rulers, Sujin continued, her eyes meeting those of delegates from species that had once cheered humanity's supposed destruction. We fought to ensure no species would ever face what we faced. No civilization should live in fear of extinction simply because they think differently or refuse to submit. Near the front of the assembly, former Zerion Admiral Korthak sat in specially designed restraints. His scaled face showed confusion as he watched his former subjects celebrate alongside the humans he had tried to exterminate. The concept of victory without conquest was beyond his understanding. Impossible, he muttered to his guard, a young human corporal named Li Jae-ho. In nature, the strong dominate the weak. How can you maintain order without enforcing hierarchy? Jae-ho, who had lost his parents during the evacuation from Earth, looked at the alien admiral with something approaching pity. That's exactly the kind of thinking that made this war inevitable. You assumed strength meant the right to rule others. We learned that true strength means protecting others' right to rule themselves. At the podium, President Su Jin gestured toward a massive, holographic display showing the new Galactic Charter. The document had been drafted by Professor Kang Hyun-woo, a legal scholar who had survived the destruction of Seoul University by hiding in the underground archives. His work represented the combined wisdom of human philosophy and the hard-learned lessons of galactic warfare. This charter establishes principles that are revolutionary for their simplicity, Sujin announced. Individual freedom for all sentient beings, technological cooperation without forced sharing, mutual defense against oppression, regardless of species or origin. The simplicity was indeed revolutionary. Previous galactic governments had been built on complex hierarchies, detailed regulations, and the assumption that some species were naturally superior to others. The human proposal turned that thinking upside down. But how will disputes be resolved? Asked Ambassador Thaisara, representing the tentacled beings from the Spiral Nebula. Without a dominant species to enforce decisions, won't there be chaos? Professor Kang stepped forward to address the question. His hair had gone completely white during humanity's exile, but his mind remained sharp as ever. Chaos is what we had before, one species forcing their will on everyone else. What we're proposing is order based on consent rather than coercion. He activated another display showing the proposed governance structure. Instead of one empire ruling through fear, we'll have voluntary associations of worlds working together for mutual benefit. Instead of technology being hoarded by the powerful, we'll share knowledge freely to benefit everyone. The chamber erupted in discussions as delegates debated the proposal. Some species, accustomed to hierarchical thinking, struggled with the concept. Others, who had suffered under Zerion rule, embraced it immediately. Outside the Great Hall, Admiral Lee Dong-ho stood on the observation deck of the orbital station, watching the most remarkable fleet ever assembled patrol the system. Human phase ships flew alongside insectoid hive vessels and crystalline light sculptures that served as Andorian warships. The aquatic Merkathi had contributed submarine-like vessels that could operate in both water and vacuum. Dong-ho was no longer the desperate refugee captain who had fled Earth's destruction. The months of hidden warfare had transformed him into something the galaxy had never seen before, a military commander whose primary mission was preventing war rather than winning it. "Sir," reported Captain Park Minna from the communications station, "we're receiving confirmation from the outer systems. The former Zerion garrison worlds are requesting membership in the new alliance." It was happening faster than anyone had expected. Species that had been oppressed for generations were eagerly joining the human-proposed system of voluntary cooperation. Even some former Zerion colonies were abandoning their allegiance to the fallen empire. "What about resistance?" Dong-ho asked. "Minimal, sir. Most Zerion forces are either surrendering or retreating to the unexplored sectors. It seems the Empire's collapse was so complete that there's no organized opposition left." Through the observation deck's massive windows, Dong-ho could see the lights of 1,000 different vessels. Each one represented a species that had chosen cooperation over domination, freedom over security, hope over fear. Commander John So-young joined him at the window, her stealth cruiser visible only because she had chosen to decloak it. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" she said quietly. "A year ago we were running for our lives. Now we're helping to rebuild galactic civilization." Dong-ho nodded, his reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum. "We set out to survive. We ended up accidentally teaching the galaxy what freedom actually means." Behind them, the Galactic Freedom Assembly continued its historic work. Species that had never cooperated before were drafting trade agreements and defense pacts. Technologies that had been military secrets were being shared openly. The concept of mutual prosperity was replacing the old system of exploitation. As Dong-ho looked out at the stars, he reflected on humanity's incredible journey. They had begun as refugees fleeing certain death. They had survived by learning to think beyond conventional limitations. And in their desperate struggle for survival, they had accidentally discovered something far more valuable than military victory. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly free. The universe would never be the same. Where once there had been an empire built on fear and domination, now there was an alliance built on hope and cooperation. And at its heart were the humans who had refused to accept extinction, choosing instead to transform not just themselves, but the entire galaxy. The Tindi End.